All right, everybody. It has been an insane month.
Mm-hmm.
There are
There's
many
just-
reasons why we have not uploaded any content for the last few weeks, which I think is disappointing for a few people because I dropped Your Hero on a massive cliffhanger that I don't think anybody's going to forgive me for. But we're here to talk about Pokemon Warpath, which I feel a little less bad about leaving on because there was kind of an intrigue in the last at the end of the last chapter, but nothing so how dare you leave us hanging on this. But we're gonna start talking about we're gonna start by talking about some of the reviews that you guys have left for us. Let's see, where is it? I know how to run things. Here we go. All right, so the first one we've got is De Silver Septile, which I believe is a reader that they've become a regular through this story. Let's see. Do you want me to read the review, or do you want?
I got it. Sorry,
All
I just
right.
need to drink some water real quick. Hey, just read the chapter and love it. Nice to see that as good of a fighter as Keihatsu is, he's still got a bit of a way to go. Plus, I have a feeling Motachika just laughed at the boot up the ass thread.
Oh yeah, he absolutely did. He absolutely did. He think that violence is his love language. I made him Australian for a reason.
I also love the talk between Keihatsu and Oichi, and the fact that he already knows that you don't piss off the healer of the party. Another thing I liked is that it makes sense that Oichi would link with a Pokemon from Dragnor.
I'm gonna assume that he meant to say wouldn't link because Oichi has no capabilities of linking with Dragon type Pokemon.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, because they had their conversation where she was like, it makes sense because she was able to bond to Jigglypuff. She's like, I guess this makes sense why I was never able to form a bond in Dragnor.
Got it. Though, please give the armor bearer's son a happy ending. The guy deserves it. Though, I don't like the love make a fool line that's just ominous. Though the good karma of the border skirmish being paid forward was nice to see, and the tactics used against the Ember Island makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, one of the things that I've gotten criticism for in the past is loading Chekhov's gun and then not firing it. So I was trying to be more deliberate with that because I wanted I didn't do the payoff immediately. It's been a while since the battle happened at the border where he spared those people.
Yeah.
But I did want to have it paid forward, and this seemed like a really good time for that to happen. I considered doing it at the at the Capitol battle. That's going to be coming, but that would have felt like a cop-out at the last moment. It makes the final victory too easy.
Okay. All right.
So this seemed like a good midway point to do it.
Yeah, I see it.
Like it's a significant win for them, but it's not monumental.
I kind of hope that Kanbei and Hanbei do stick around because I feel that they really need to see how a proper warlord works and not one that's incompetent like Hideyoshi.
Oh yeah, they're recurring characters. Absolutely.
I mean, how did he not know that the coalition was deep into his territory? Though, is Yoke a reference from somewhere or is it just a name you pulled?
It's not a reference that I'm aware of. The name is. So it's a variation on Hikari, because depending on how you write either word Yoke or Hikari, it can be read as dawn, like the dawn of a new day. Yoke is the term that you would use more often if that's the specific word that you're going for, you're specifically Yoke, if I'm not mistaken, is a rising sun almost,
Yeah.
and then that leads into a whole other lesson in Japanese because the word that Japan used to use for itself was Nihonja, which literally means the land of the rising sun. Yoke doesn't sound anything like that, but the kanji that they use are similar to one another, or the characters that they use can add up the same way. So even though the words sound nothing alike, the meaning is very similar.
Gotcha. All right. Anyway, sorry for this essay of a review, but I can't wait for the next chapter.
Mate, this is not an essay. This is not, compared to a lot of the stuff that we've had to read.
Fine,
this is not an essay. I'm pretty sure Kira's left us an essay.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, the Silver Subtile.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Alrighty, Joe Clone. Ooh, this one was spicy. Lots of action. Also, some nice moments with Keihatsu and other people getting closer to him. Nice to have at least a general explanation of Jigglypuff and Oichi for now.
I'm working on the short story concerning them. It's been an insane month, and I've had a bad case of writer's block for a little bit longer. I'm working through some of it, and I'm hoping to get back on a roll here soon. But it's been difficult.
And now conflict. I think our coalition led by Keihatsu did very well in the campaign so far. And taking Takoro, OG Bionicle reference, proving to be not as easy to subjugate was pretty clever writing. I was on the edge of my seat with Keihatsu when Keihatsu issued that challenge to the commander.
Ooh.
Of course, they literally burn the fire bridges. I guess the only support that island could feasibly send would be by air.
Yeah, that's a problem for them now. Is like they have any city that's built to withstand a siege has supplies that can last them a fair amount of time. However, those resources are not indefinite, and the problem with that always is that the sieging force is going to have a much easier time of getting supplies, especially since they can have people ready to just shoot down any air support that comes their way. So he has Ember Island in a chokehold right now, and it didn't take much. It didn't take much in the way of manpower to do it. He just had to choose the right troops to do it.
Ha! Monkey Hideyoshi, hilarious. And hysterical. I love it. Historical. I love it. Now, who's Yoke and what is her deal?
You'll find out by the end of this chapter.
All right. Thank you, Joe Clone.
Thank you.
Alrighty, Silly Kita. Well, there is quite a bit to unpack here. I see Keihatsu's having some trouble keeping himself from the action, and while I can certainly believe that it's for noble reasons at the forefront of his mind, I do not have to remember that I do have to remember that he's still young. It is possible that his inclination to join the fray, though his Pokemon is a result through his I'll let you read.
Okay. I do have to remember that he is still young. Is it possible that his inclination to join the fray through his Pokemon is the result of a subconscious juvenile mindset? I'm not saying that he's being petty about being made to keep out of the main fight right off the bat, but it does seem kind of irresponsible for the commander of 3 countries worth of soldiers to try and get his pound of flesh from the enemy whilst managing said army. Don't get me wrong, it's cool to see him keeping up with the best of them and leading from the front lines, as it were, but I feel like you're winding up for this habit to bite him somehow. Well, again, like I said earlier, I'm trying to work on how I manage Chekhov's gun, so we'll get to that eventually. It was cool to see how he's still looking out for his subjects whenever he can, like with keeping Munizane and his personal guard despite the assassination attempt in the capital, or how he reinstated his father's old armor bearer. Him and Oichi being cute is always cute, and I love how into each other they are, even with all the stuff going on around them. Obviously we can't say to the same degree, but going through it with someone you care about that much, in my experience, has only brought us closer.
Yeah. I mean, that's if you have a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
I think that, trials of this kind can create pressure on a strained relationship. But when it's a solid relationship, then it just kind of causes you to rely on each other more and brings you closer together. So,
yeah. Let's see. Now, I will say that I had to read this chapter twice before I could see what it really contributed to the overarching story in the grand scheme of things. So once I saw it, I was able to enjoy it a little more fully. At first, it just seemed like something of a checkpoint chapter, as in, this is what's been going on since we last popped in, without really advancing anything other than the Coalition's location on the map. Yes, we get to see some large-scale conflicts on screen for the first time in this story, as well as how Oichi is fitting in as a pacifist at the side of a warlord, but I think the biggest contributor to the story itself for this chapter is that we get a good look at how Keihatsu continues to act, in spite of the added pressures of being Battlemaster on top of the psychological damage that had to take place as a result of the assassination attempt.
Is this just him pushing the resulting anxieties down in an attempt to do what he needs to do as a leader? Is he genuinely unbothered by the events just because of the way he grew up as the kind of illegitimate child of the last warlord? I am left with these questions, which leads me to continue investing my interest in this character, even if the events themselves seem to be kind of moving along in a mostly predictable manner.
I don't know how to answer that regarding like whether or not it actually bothers him. Like so much of who he is being the warlord and setting aside himself. Like for the most part, the only time he allows himself to like have really anything in way of himself, if that makes any sense, is when he's alone with Oichi.
Yeah.
The rest of the time, it's like I'm the warlord and I have to. I don't have.
He loses himself in a way, like, but it's like.
I don't know if he loses himself because, like, for him, like, this is what he was born to be. Like, even if he didn't get the throne the way that he thought he would,
he almost doesn't have the right to have his own personality because that's his position kind of takes all that up.
Yeah. It's honestly, I'm not sure how to answer that one. Like, I suppose, like, it might bother him more if he felt that he was more free to explore himself outside of being the warlord, but he doesn't really let himself do that.
Yeah, well, he knows it's not a reality for him, so.
No, as soon as his dad died, he was like, all right, I'm the warlord.
There's no room to entertain those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Let's see.
I think the portion that stood out the most to me in this chapter were the last two segments. If I'm to venture a guess about what's going to happen after reading the latest interaction between Hideyoshi and his vice warlords, I'm going to say that after Hideyoshi is deposed or killed, it's going to be Kanbei who becomes the new warlord. Hanbei seems like the kind to switch his loyalties a little too quickly if it best suits him, and that's honestly not a great quality for a warlord to have. Kanbei seems like a piece of work, but of the three, I get the sense that he actually loves his country, not to mention that he seems to have some measure of Keihatsu's respect, which probably doesn't hurt his chances for the aftermath once the coalition wins, which I have no doubt will occur, it's just a matter of how.
That's an interesting thought on that.
Yeah, I think it hadn't occurred to me at this point in reading it.
No?
No, I think I didn't really know how the mechanics worked, first of all, because I didn't.
Fair enough.
I didn't play the game.
Yeah.
And so that didn't really occur to me. But I mean, the line of reasoning makes sense because you have the more, at least one of them's more driven, you know?
Yeah.
But I think, and then, you know, having someone who's wishy-washy and will change sides that quickly is a little concerning, you know?
Yeah.
So I get that for sure.
All right.
Let's see. Now, just who is the lady that Hanbei went to recruit? Hideyoshi seems to know something about her that would set her against Keihatsu. Is she perhaps someone that the noble Auroran houses wanted him to marry for the sake of public relations with Ignis, but he turned her down? With all the political marriage shenanigans that seem to take place on this continent, that seems most likely to me. That's an interesting theory.
Too cliche. Way too cliche.
Really?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not what I'm going for at all, but I feel like that's interesting that that's the line of.
It's not about thought.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know if I need to be more mindful about hints that I'm accidentally dropping, because I don't know if you remember this, but like during the first year of Your Hero Academia, for a good portion of that, people were wondering if Yairozu had a thing for Kurai and was mad at him because he went for Mina instead.
No.
And it was completely unrelated. It was something completely unrelated.
I don't think that's you. I think that our culture tends to just immediately go into a romantic relationship when people's emotions and thoughts and feelings are way more complex than that.
I agree.
And
I'm like,
I don't think it's you.
Okay.
I think that's just.
It just feels like this has happened more than
what
once
it is,
that
though,
I'm like.
Western media does that. If there is a female character and a male character, and they have a friendship or a
Relationship of some
relationship
significance.
people automatically go to shipping them. That's just the way it is. They create romantic tension where there is none. I mean, don't even get me started on Rings of Power, but it's like,
Jeez.
I mean,
That dumpster fire.
you know, there are things about it that I like. There's things about it I hate. But the thing that I hate the most, one of the things that I hate the most, is that Galadriel and Elrond, that there's this random romantic tension in some parts. And it's like, they're freaking related.
I was like, they're
each
related,
other.
aren't they?
Yeah.
That's like his great aunt or something, right?
Yeah. She's basically his aunt. But because it's produced by Western media, you can't have two people of the opposite gender, or really even the same gender anymore, and not have that be a question.
Yeah, I remember I was trying to combat that when I was writing the Shattered Fragment series, because there was this point where Sinon and Mataris were having a conversation where they're kind of like, not like everybody was kind of like poking fun at them or like genuinely wondering, it's like, what's up with you two? And they had to have a conversation where they're like, there's nothing here, right? No, okay, all right, cool. I was worried it was just,
make sure.
It's like I want to make sure that it wasn't just me. They're like but like because of the result of the what word am I looking for? The culture that they grew up in, it's like everybody jumps to that conclusion.
Yeah, and I mean that's what people do. Like if you spend more time with one person, they're automatically going to make that assumption because that's just how our brains are.
Yeah.
But,
or how they've become, I think, because I don't know if this used to be as much of a problem.
No, I mean, I think that
I feel like there was always that nosy.
wisdom.
There was always that nosy neighborhood lady who was gossiping about
reading
whichever.
too much into whatever.
Yeah.
And I think and that's the other thing is there is a level of wisdom to like limiting the amount of time you spend alone with someone. When you're in a committed relationship, but that's the thing. Human beings have to like get things done and work together to do so. You can't just like hide and never speak to anyone that's not your significant other. It's just, and in real life, people have real relationships. I have real friendships with my male coworkers. There is nothing there. I have no interest in any of them that way, but we genuinely care for each other because we are friends and we work together.
Yep.
And that's just how that works.
Yep.
And I think that, when you are working together with a group of people to complete something, you're automatically going to work better with certain individuals, and that's just how life works because of the way personalities are. I'm gonna get a lot more done working with my music teacher than I am with the PE coach, because of our personalities. There's nothing wrong with them.
Your
we
fields
have
tend to line up a
we have
little more.
similar disciplines, we have similar personalities, so we can get stuff done. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just, I think that I don't think it's relates to your writing. I think it's just the trope that
has been created,
especially in Western media. I feel like it's less common in anime, but it's still there to a certain degree.
So to answer the question about maybe this girl, someone he turned down, I was like I don't know that I can definitively say anything because I'm not sure that I put it in writing. But I was like, no, wait, I have put it in writing that Keihatsu was like, I have not done anything to piss off the Ignesian people.
Yeah.
After that kid tried to kill him, he was like, my dad didn't do anything to piss him off. I didn't do anything to piss him off. Your warlord has beef with me. I don't get what his damage is, but that's that. So if something like this had occurred, I feel like at that moment he could have been like he could have been like, wait a minute. Was she like Hideyoshi's daughter? So I need to go check some stuff.
I don't know. No, it's not a bad thought. Like I think following most common tropes, I could totally see it as being a jealous ex-lover or somebody who was turned down. Like I can see that.
Yeah. He does have a few of those.
Yeah, they do exist. Yeah. They do exist, but this is not that situation.
Yeah.
So.
No, but yeah. Again, I thought that's an interesting thought. Like my brain didn't even go that way when I was thinking of how to introduce this. But
no, it's a good thought. It's a good thought.
Alrighty. Closing thought is looking forward to seeing further shenanigans develop. Happy writing until the next one. Well, I think you're gonna like this next chapter then because it's gonna have quite the shenanigan. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll be back after the recording. Challenge for the throne. I'm beginning to dislike waiting. It was your idea to conceal this in the first place. Well, yes, but I had heard tell of my future husband's legendary accomplishments and assumed that he could defeat Ignis single-handedly in time for us to be home for supper. Oichi giggled softly as she pressed her forehead against Keihatsu's, who made a soft humming sound of contentment. I did not anticipate that waiting to tell others could make one feel so pensive. The two of them were in Keihatsu's study aboard his ship, which was being used to transport not only him and his advisors, but also the wounded Pokémon and warriors of his homeland. The same use was being made of the other warlords' airships, and it was going to be another 2 days before they made it to Entei City, so it was an opportunity for the young couple to have some alone time, something they were enjoying immensely. The Coalition's main forces were marching beneath them, so they weren't flying as fast as they could have been. Had that been the case, they could have made it to the next inhabited place within hours instead of days. A small chunk of those numbers had been sent to set up an embargo around Ember Island, mostly comprised of veteran Auroran and Fontaine warrior Pokemon pairs. Keihatsu had received word earlier in the morning that the passive siege against the impregnable city was proceeding as planned, which had allowed him to breathe considerably easier. Oichi knew that he had worried he might have sent 100-odd men, women, and Pokemon to their deaths, and so she had suggested they take a little time to unwind in his study. Takanobu had initially protested their time of leisure, saying that Keihatsu had many matters to attend to, but he had been swiftly delegated to many of said tasks by a very straight-faced Nashige. The fact that the couple's Pokemon were also being kept busy by Nashige's Braviary and Staraptor told Keihatsu he owed the older warrior a large favor sometime in the near future. For now, though, he was enjoying the peace and quiet of the late morning in the company of the girl he had fallen in love with, and even with an army marching beneath his feet, he felt at peace. With that in mind, he pulled back his head a little and said, "Given our clandestine meetings occurring at every opportune moment, I doubt that many people will be surprised when we do make it official. I can think of a few nobles back in Aurora who will be shocked plenty." The girl laughed again. Ever since Keihatsu had expressed his desire and intent to marry Oichi, she seemed to have developed much lighter footsteps, and smiles came more easily to her delicate face. She had also become quicker and more confident with her words, though she still tended to remain on the quieter side when in the presence of a war council amidst veteran warriors like Nashige. Even so, he liked seeing her as she was, a far cry from the reticent wanderer she had been forced to become. In response to her jib about the nobles, he smiled again and said, "Perhaps we should have a sketch artist or two sit in the hall for the announcements so that we may have a record of the nobles' faces. Mayhap a third one specifically for Sir Tsunahisa." Oichi's lips quirked upward before she turned to look out of the window while saying, "Much of me is glad that you would say such things, but a small part of me also knows that his insubordination sprang from a love of his country and a wish to protect its foundations. Is it wrong that I feel guilty in having essentially robbed him of his seat on your council?" "You shouldn't," Keihatsu assured her softly. Regardless of our involvement, his desperate clutching at traditions would not allow him to embrace the future that is coming to our people. A time that is not like it was under my father. "Was your father not a good ruler?" Oichi asked as she turned back to look at him again. "You always speak well of his ability to govern Aurora." "He was an excellent warlord," Keihatsu nodded. "I am proud to be of his kingdom and his blood, but I do not feel a desire to be him. I've never believed that in order to be great, one must replicate the every actions and decisions of those who have gone before them. Times change, and so must the people in charge of governing the peace change with them." "And how did the times change under your father?" Oichi asked curiously. "I have yet to actually hear much about his accomplishments as a ruler, despite everyone's admiration of him. That is, unless you would rather discuss something else." "No, I don't mind at all." Let's see." Keihatsu mused as his mind reached back to recall the history he had been taught. "I can only tell you what my instructors told me, as much of this was well before my time." "Of course." "If I recall..." He rolled his eyes up slightly as he tried to make sure he was keeping things straight before he began to say. He was in his early 20s when he first became the warlord of Aurora, having won the throne in combat against Lord Hakobe. At the time, he was bonded to a resolute Stoutland, a ferocious Exploud, and a powerful Bouffalant. By the time he passed away, he added a Slay King and an Unpheasant to his retinue. 5 Pokemon, Oichi gasped. "The strength of will that would take..." "See?" Keihatsu chuckled softly as he turned away, an unidentifiable look in his eye. "There is a plethora of reasons why people respect and admire my father, and that is but one of them." Oichi considered his words and change in tone for a moment before she stepped closer to him and asked, "Do you resent the image that he left for you to fill?" Keihatsu sighed deeply before answering, "In a way, yes, I suppose I do. I believe that I have the potential to become as great, if not greater, than he was, but because he had left me his throne so early in my life, I've not had the time to gain the experience and strength equal to that of his when he became warlord. But because I am already the ruler, people expect of me the same wisdom and power that he once possessed, especially given that he was my father." Oichi looked at him with sympathy as she realized he suddenly looked very tired and unsure of himself. "Forgive me for disagreeing, but even if that was the case when you first assumed the throne, I do not think it is such any longer," she told him earnestly, hoping to lift his spirits with her next words. "Your people have seen you act with your own will, and they have witnessed the strength behind your resolve, not your father's. The men and women of this coalition are following Keihatsu, warlord of Aurora, not Keihatsu, the son of Avoki." As she had hoped, his words saw to his shoulders lifting a little before he asked, "Do you truly think so?" "I think I've been busy, far too busy trying to organize this army to notice if the soldiers are actually respecting the chain of command. The fact that there is not a constant fear of betrayal from those in your services should be an answer in and of itself," she assured him. "Many leaders of the past have had to worry about being undermined by those beneath them, but there is no such risk to you here. Even those in the courts of your hall have been diminished, because they dare not go against the champion of the people. The people of not just Aurora, but Fontaine and Greenleaf also, respect and admire you, and rightly so, for you have already done mighty things, to say nothing of what you will go on to do." Keihatsu couldn't help but feel a little pride in hearing his betrothed speaking so well of him, though he did his best not to allow it to take root in his heart. Pride in excess would beget arrogance, a trait that could undo everything he had worked to build in his time as a ruler. Even so, he felt the corners of his mouth lift a little as he turned to look at Oichi and say, "Thank you for believing in me." "Of course, my love," she said as she turned red and hid part of her face with her kimono sleeve. It was clear that while the forwardness of the epithet had embarrassed her, she had been wanting to use it for some time, and Keihatsu was further gladdened to hear it. Before he could say anything in the way of returning her affections, Oichi lowered her sleeve and said, "I am sorry that I interrupted your narrative. Is it all right if you continue to talk about Lord Avoki, or would you rather move on to something else while we have the time?" Keihatsu had to hide a smile at her not-so-subtle hint that she wished to move on from her moment of embarrassment, but he did want to continue to discuss a topic of interest to her, so he decided against the gentle teasing that he wanted to engage in that moment. "Of course we can continue the history lesson," he assured her as he gathered his thoughts, feeling much more comfortable in doing so this time. With Oichi's reassurances that he was becoming his own man firmly in his heart, he felt no apprehension in describing his father's accomplishments and even being compared to them. So, after taking the throne from Lord Hakobe, he soon took a wife, Lady Mizure of the influential Shimura family, who ruled as queen until she was assassinated by two of my father's concubines. Given the fact that he had 3 lovers besides his wife, you can imagine it wasn't exactly a happy marriage, even from the beginning. "If it was an arranged marriage, I believe I can now begin to fully comprehend your disliking of them," Oichi murmured, which led to Keihatsu nodding quietly. Why would he shackle himself to someone he clearly did not love? "Tradition of politics," the young man muttered as if the words formed a foul curse. "The Shimuras have a long history of keeping close to the throne, whether that be as a warlord, a senior advisor, the spouse of a ruler. They have always had a presence at the head of our nation. They and several other advisors insisted that if my father wanted to maintain discipline over the other noble houses, my father would be best served by having his spouse be of their blood, as his word would essentially become theirs as well." "So has that tradition been broken?" Oichi asked curiously. "Was Sir Tsunehisa a member of that house?" "No, he hails from the Koriyama family," Keihatsu said with a negative shake of his head. "In fact, the Shimuras still have a presence in my confidence, though I trust in his earnestness more than I doubt his family's intentions." "Wait," Oichi said slowly as comprehension began to dawn in her eyes. "Is Sir Takanobu related to your stepmother?" "He is her nephew." Keihatsu nodded in confirmation. "If I had not been of age when my father died, it is very likely that he would have been nominated as warlord of Aurora. In fact, I'm sure there are many in the Shimura clan who were disappointed that they were denied the opportunity to directly control the throne again." "But," Oichi looked incredibly confused now, "he doesn't seem to resent you at all, unlike many of the others of the noble houses. Why?" "Because he is a patriot," Keihatsu answered simply. "He loves Aurora more than he desires power, and I believe that he believes that this is where he needs to be to most effectively protect his homeland. I have no doubt that if he saw me as an inept ruler, he would have challenged me for the throne a long time ago. Instead, he is one of my most reliable supporters, and I am forever grateful to him because of it. Does that make him your extended relative? Oichi asked, still trying to wrap her head around this new revelation. If you had been born of the queen and he is her nephew, then that would have made you two... I suppose we could be considered cousins on paper, yes. Keihatsu nodded, having seen where her inquiry was headed. But the fact is, there's no blood relation between us. He's of Mizure's brother, not a relative of my father's, who was an only child. Besides all of that, he and I are more than 10 years apart, and we were not raised together as family. My stepmother never would have allowed it, even if we were closer in age. There was something extra in his voice that led Oichi to ask, You disliked your queen, I take it? I remember you saying that she wanted to get rid of you and your mother, yes? Yes. He nodded as his eyes became distant. She was unable to have children, and my mother was supposedly my father's favorite concubine, though whether or not that has to do with the fact that she alone bore him an heir, I don't know. Whatever the case, she resented me and my mother greatly, as we were living testaments to her failure, for lack of a better term. She could never try to get rid of us directly, as my father certainly would have allowed it, but in the end, she was the reason that my mother left Aurora, leaving me with my father and the promise that if something were to happen to me, Mizure would suffer a wrath comparable to the legendary Groudon. 2 of the other concubines murdered her shortly after that, yes? Correct. Keihatsu said as he made a face. Neither of them were particularly bright, but after they and the queen were dead, my mother should have been free to return to Aurora without fear of something happening to me. My father even sent people to search for her, but after a year of looking without success, they were forced to conclude that she is likely dead or else fled the country. From the way he was speaking, Oichi would have guessed that he believed in the latter. Do you have any idea where she might have gone? She asked him. Keihatsu's face quirked with a slightly wistful smile before he answered, I was planning on going on a journey to Elusio after I came of age, due to the fact that she had always promised to take me there herself one day. Apparently the floating crystal islands there are among some of the most wondrous sights in Ransai, and I wanted to see them since I was little. Perhaps it's silly of me to hope that she somehow intends to keep her promise even now, but my heart tells me that if I were to find her anywhere, it would be there. It's not silly to want to find your loved ones, no matter how many years have passed, and no matter how slim the chance may be, Oichi told him softly. When things with Ignis are settled, and you and I are married, I will do whatever I can to make your journey to Elusio possible, whether that is accompanying you on the trip, or staying behind to oversee the kingdom so that you may rest easier at night, or something else that you can think of. Whatever it takes to help you find your mother and bring her home, I will do it. Thank you, Keihatsu said in a trembling voice as his body shook for a few seconds. I try not to think about it often, but I miss her so much. Oichi was slightly alarmed to see that there were a few tears leaking out of his eyes, though he quickly wiped them away. Even so, she had seen him endure some fairly agonizing events without so much as a word of complaint, and she had certainly never seen him cry before, which told her just how much this had to be eating him up inside. If I may ask, why did you never embark on your journey? She asked as she moved to embrace him from the side. It clearly means more to you than anything to be able to find what happened to her. Keihatsu drew in a shuddering breath but to compose himself before he answered, Perhaps I am a bad son for saying so, but one thing does matter to me more than finding my mother, and that is the safety and prosperity of Aurora. 3 weeks before I was due to set out on my journey, my father succumbed to the disease that had been eating away at his health for nearly a year. He had assured me that he would be more than capable of maintaining the kingdom despite his sickness, but I suppose his flesh disagreed with his mind's assessment of his ability to survive. You had to attend to the throne, Oichi finished for him. You couldn't leave because you knew your people needed you more than your mother does. As I said, I am a bad son, he chuckled ruefully, but it was either be a good warlord or a good son. I couldn't do both. I disagree, Oichi insisted as she tightened her hold on him. If what you've told me about your mother is anything to go by, I am certain that she is proud to have such a patriotic son like you. Men who are willing to forsake themselves for the betterment of others are rare, and you've exhibited this trait in the most genuine fashion that I have ever seen. The more that she talked to Keihatsu, the more she realized that for all of his self-confidence and charisma, He still lacked a sense of validation in his efforts, and he had been for some time. Now she understood that his mother must have been one of the only people in his life who had ever taught him that his works were praiseworthy, and without her, he had been left wondering whether or not his every major decision and action were the right ones. This led to her inquiring, "With all due respect to your father, why do you look up to him as you do? Whether or not he was a good ruler to the people, it does not seem to me that he was a good father to you." Keihatsu mused with a little smile as he looked at her with warmth. "Perhaps he was far from ideal, but he was the only father I had, and for all his faults, he did teach me many things that I consider important. Even if the legacy of his family is a broken one, I can genuinely admire his accomplishments, of which there are many. I may speak more freely of his faults, but I think that to be a result of the fact that I am one of the few who were directly affected by them. A good ruler does not allow the pitfalls of his personal life to impact his kingdom, though he should take care to share in his success with his people." Oichi tilted her head slightly and thought at that. "Does that not seem to be a tad on the side of hypocrisy?" she asked, causing him to look at her with a slightly puzzled frown. "I don't take your meaning," he replied. "You have always told me that you wish for your people to see you as a man same as they. But if all they see are your successes, how are they to assume that you are like them at all?" she asked him. This seemed to give him pause because it was several seconds before he murmured, "I hadn't thought about it like that, I suppose. I'll have to meditate on the matter before I can give you an answer proper to that." "I'm sorry," she apologized. "I have no right to criticize your way of thinking. I have given you every right," Keihatsu assured her as he turned to tilt her chin slightly upwards with a gentle smile. "You and I are to be married, which makes you my closest advisor until the time comes for one of us to depart. My father did teach me that I would do well as a ruler to surround myself with people whose concerns align with mine, even if not their ideology. This allows me to consider angles that I never would have thought up in the first place." Oichi couldn't help but smile back at him while she said, "Perhaps your father did possess some true wisdom after all. I'll listen more to what you have to say about him, but if I hear one more tale about his actions begetting sadness for you, I may just make my first order as Queen of Aurora to tear down that statue of him by the southern city gate." "Please don't," Keihatsu said with a nervous laugh. "I would rather our wedding festivities not consist of angry people trying to battle me when I could be spending time with you." They spent several hours talking about Lord Avoki after that, and by the end of it, Oichi could understand why the man was held in such high esteem by all of his people, high and lowborn alike. His battle prowess was legendary, both in single combat and on the fields of war, and his son seemed to have inherited his father's ability to inspire others to greatness. He drove back one of the previous rulers of Fontaine multiple times over the course of his first decade as warlord, until the other man lost credibility in the eyes of his people, and was overthrown by a woman partnered with a Floatzel, Vaporeon, and Feraligatr, who would eventually be dethroned by Motochika. Avoki had also secured good relations with Greenleaf during his lifetime, and he had personally seen to it that every settlement in his kingdom was outfitted with a hospital, or at least a medical triage for people in Pokemon, be it a poor hamlet, a lively town, or an illustrious city. He did many other things besides, but those were the tales that Keihatsu seemed the most eager to recount, so Oichi did her best to commit them to memory. She was still not sure that she would ever admire him the way that those born of Aurora did, but she could at least understand why they respected him so. Then again, she was fairly disinclined to like anyone who made trouble for Keihatsu, especially when they should have been looking out for him, so perhaps her view was tainted by a certain amount of bias. It wasn't until the sun was beginning its descent into the mountains of Ignis that the couple realized they had spent nearly 10 hours alone in the warlord's study without even pausing to have lunch, and when they did, they both burst out laughing. "Some battle master I am," Keihatsu laughed as he held his stomach. "Takanobu will have my head for this." Seeing this motion and fearing for his health, Oichi's laughter subsided as she moved to put her hands over his while asking, "Is your wound troubling you again?" "What? What?" the young man replied as he tried to repress his merriment. No. That one hasn't been any trouble for weeks now, don't worry. The only thing hurting is my muscles, which I suppose shows how long it's been since I've truly been able to laugh like that." Oichi's smile returned before she told him, "Then I will see to it that you have the opportunity to do so more often in the future. Laughter is a potent medicine, and I intend on keeping you healthy for as long as possible." Then she hugged him fiercely, happy to feel unfettered by the fear of losing yet another person to her accursed black luck. Of course, that was the exact moment that Naoshige knocked on the door and entered, startling the young couple enough that they froze like a little fletchling that has been cornered by a viper. He regarded them with a slightly raised eyebrow before he said, "Lords Motochika and Motonari have come to discuss a few matters, my lord, Lady Oichi. Shall I admit them, or would you rather meet them on the bridge?" Keihatsu composed himself while reading his advisor's body language in order to come up with an answer. "They're standing outside the door, aren't they?" he asked in a neutral tone. Before Naoshige could answer, a familiar voice called from up the hallway. "No, nobody here. Keep on doing whatever you've been doing, lovebirds." Oichi flushed absolutely scarlet while Keihatsu rolled his eyes and Naoshige shrugged. "Let them in," the young warlord decided. "We shirked our duties enough for today." "Don't worry about it overmuch," Motonari said with a patient smile as he walked through the door, followed by a grinning Motochika and a disgruntled Takanobu. "It's not been a day rife with much to do. We've gone over just about every strategy that we can for taking Entei City, so all that remains is to choose one of those methods of approach." "Have we decided on a contingency retreat plan?" Keihatsu asked, his mood becoming much more businesslike as he moved closer to the two warlords, while Oichi kept her back to them, obviously trying to get her expression under control long enough to be presentable to the others. "Motonari has an idea for that." Motochika shrugged as he walked straight toward Keihatsu's liquor cabinet. The young man didn't drink much himself, but he felt it polite to have such amenities prepared for guests like the Fontaine leader. "I have had a certain unit, the Varisian Battalion, practice working together to alter the remaining terrain on a large scale," Motonari explained as Takanobu shut the door behind him. "They will be able to create a synthetic barrier of dense force between us and the enemy forces, should we find ourselves in need to make a getaway. It won't last long against fire types, granted, but it will buy us enough time to either get a head start or cut off our pursuers from the main force. I have other strategies, of course, but I felt that given that this will be one of the last areas of Ignis's terrain that isn't comprised largely of volcanic fields, it seems as good a time as any to have it ready. I'll need to see where the optimal place would be to position them, but it sounds like a good idea to me." Keihatsu nodded as Motochika returned with a glass of strong-smelling brandy. "I also want a company of fresh combat healers to stand by with them, as I imagine that if we are driven back, our people will have extensive wounds among them. I'd also prefer them to be from Fontaine." Motochika tipped back the glass and downed the powerful brew in one gulp before exhaling sharply and asking, "Well, my people, wouldn't their Pokémon be better suited to fighting and healing on the front lines?" "They'd be some of our last lines of defense if we did have any number of pursuers," Keihatsu explained. "I'd need warriors capable of fighting and administering aid simultaneously, and most of my warriors are not trained to do that. They only do one or the other. Same as it is with our allies from Greenleaf. We could make do with your warriors, certainly, but I believe that this will maximize all of our people's chances for survival, should something go wrong." Motochika seemed to think on that for a moment before he shrugged and said, "Is your call, Battlemaster? As long as me and my warriors' Pokemon get to hit something in the next couple days, we're happy." "I sincerely doubt you'll have a lack of targets to vent your frustrations on," Keihatsu said with a hint of wry humor. To Motonari, he said, "If you wouldn't mind drawing up the maps, I need to have a brief word with my advisors." "Of course." Motonari nodded as Motochika moved to refill his glass. He smacked his peer's hand away from the decanter, much to his irritation, before he said, "I need you sober long enough to sort out your agent's reconnaissance reports." "Bah!" As soon as Keihatsu was standing among his council, he said in a lowered tone, "I think I might have to donate part of my refreshment stock to Fontaine's airship. Their warlord seems to have a similar palate to my father, and I suppose it would be in poor taste to let the old stuff go to waste. That, and if he has one too many, I'd feel more comfortable having his people handle him than dealing with it myself." "I must advise against this, my lord," Naoshige replied, surprising the boy. "If we are to maintain good relations with our allies, it is in our best interest to make accommodations for our guests when they visit, however small or disruptive the gesture may be." He said it with such a straight face that Keihatsu knew the man was laughing uncontrollably on the inside. Still, after everything the advisor had done to give him and Oichi a near full day of rest, he couldn't well go and contradict him right that moment. "I suppose you're right, Sir Naoshige," he nodded reluctantly. Turning to Takanobu, he said, "My apologies for making you work so hard today, both of you. I did not realize how quickly the time was passing us by." Naoshige and Takanobu exchanged a brief look before the younger of the two sighed and said, "It is not our place to question how you spend your time, my lord. Sir Nashige has reminded me that you have been working quite hard without complaint, and someone in your position should have a time of rest every now and again in order to keep your wits sharp. I apologize for my complaints this morning. They were not warranted. They are warranted when your leader is shirking his duties. Keihatsu replied firmly. Please accept my apologies, Sir Takanobu, Sir Nashige. Today's negligence will not be repeated under these circumstances. With all due respect, my lord, Nashige rumbled, drawing his master's attention solely to him before he continued. It would be one thing if you were simply being truant and ignoring all of your duties. Some may argue that you shirked your duties as battle master today, but given the summation of your prior efforts, I believe a day of rest has been well earned. I also would not describe your attendance to the Lady Oichi's well-being and happiness as a negligence of your duties when one takes into consideration the fact that you are clearly courting her. Both Keihatsu and Oichi's faces reddened at the man's blunt words, which in turn caused Takanobu to smile broadly. How long have... Keihatsu couldn't quite seem to finish the sentence. My lord, you may be the head of our nation, but you are also quite young. Nashige answered him. You play the game of politics well, and in that arena you have a masterful mask of indifference. Most of the time. In regards to matters of the heart, however, you possess almost no subtlety whatsoever. Go for the throat, why don't you? Keihatsu responded, though he couldn't keep a smile off his face. We were planning on waiting to make an official announcement until after we'd returned home from Ignis with the situation resolved, but I suppose I should have known better than to think anything escaped your eyes, Nashige. The blame is mine for attempting to conceal the truth, Oichi said as she bowed deeply to the two advisors. I did not wish to upset the political balance that our lord has worked so hard to maintain by antagonizing the noble houses any more than my presence alone already has. Before she could go on, Takanobu raised a hand to forestall her while saying, You owe us no apology, Lady Oichi. When the girl simply stared at him dumbstruck, he added, We have never seen our master as happy as he has been in these last few months with you by his side, even in spite of the circumstances surrounding us. So Nashige and I approve of you, and perhaps more importantly, so do the warriors and common folk of Aurora, many of whom you helped and cared for personally ever since you entered our master's service. You need not fear us, good lady. Nashige nodded solemnly. There is no doubt in either of our minds that your affections for our master are genuine, which is more than we can say of his previous suitors. However this courtship proceeds, so long as it does, you will both have our full support. As he finished speaking, he favored Oichi with a rare smile, which saw to her smiling in return and bowing slightly in his direction once again. You have no doubts whatsoever? Keihatsu asked him a little dubiously. Don't misunderstand. I'm immeasurably grateful to the both of you for this, but Sir Nashige always struck me as a cautious man. I expected more resistance from him. To that, Nashige merely shrugged. I have already given my reasons for why I believe her to be a good match for you, my lord, he said simply. Anything further said on my part would be redundant. My only inquiry is about how this courtship will culminate, Takanobu told them. I suspect that his lordship has no intention of repeating his father's habits, but I would rather know the correct details to pass along when the rumors begin to fly about, as they already have, mind you. For now, tell them nothing, Keihatsu said with a little smile as he moved to grasp Oichi's slender hand. Our happiness belongs to us for the time being, and we would like it to keep it that way for a while longer. But for your ears alone, we intend to be married at a suitable time. Nashige nodded once before saying, As you wish, my lord. With all of that being said, Oichi spoke up, surprising the men as she gave each of them a shaky smile. It warms my heart to have people who genuinely wish to support our master and myself. Thank you very much, the both of you. You are most welcome, my lady, Nashige said, surprising her with a return bow. As he straightened up, he added, I look forward to seeing you crowned as Lord Keihatsu's queen. While Oichi reddened once again, Takanobu also gave her a bow as he said, As I have served Lord Keihatsu, when the time comes for you to sit at his right hand as his bride, I shall serve you also. Many thanks, the girl said as she felt an overwhelming surge of emotions flooding her heart. Only months ago she had been wandering, with little direction, only seeking to escape an inevitable doom that would crush her into dust, all alone and forgotten by the world. Now she stood in the sky, with a purpose in her mind, a home in her heart, and an unconditional love soothing her soul. All that in mind, she turned to Keihatsu and whispered, I still want to wait to make an official announcement until we return home, but we are among friends here, and friends deserve to share in some of our joy, right? Her betrothed followed her gaze, which was fixed on Motochika and Motonari, who were staring intently on the maps on the table. both of them with journals on either side, that they would consult before rearranging stone pieces that represented different divisions of the armed forces. A new smile stretched across his face as he answered, "I do believe you have a point, my dear." Tugging on her hand to lead her along, he beckoned to his advisors to follow them as he said, "Come now. It's time we celebrate this properly." To the other warlords, Keihatsu said, "Lords of Fontaine and Greenleaf, I bear tidings of the most joyous kind." To that, the other men looked at him with smiles of their own, with Motochika saying, "About damn time, Kei." The coalition arrived at Entei City 2 days later in the early morning. After a brief debate, it was decided that they would begin the attack at dusk, after their troops had time to get more organized, and the city's defenders had endured a long, stressful day of waiting to be attacked without anything actually happening to them. "We've done well with preserving the element of surprise thus far in the campaign," Keihatsu was saying as he stood at the head of the senior war council's table. "Now, however, we cannot afford the luxury of assuming that our presence has gone unnoticed. We are drawing close to the heart of the nation, and word of our victories will have spread, no matter how tightly we attempt to restrict communications between enemy settlements. I imagine that Hideyoshi has at least heard from Ember Island by now, which should tell him just how much of a threat we actually pose to his military. Therefore, it would be a prudent measure to change tactics at this point in the campaign." "Isn't that in and of itself a larger risk?" Ujisato questioned with a slight frown. "Why should we change our plans when they've proven so effective thus far? It's not as though Ignis's intelligence network has anything to be concerned with. As you said, they've allowed us to get this far into the country without mustering any forces from the kingdom's standing army." "And that is exactly why I'm worried," Keihatsu countered firmly. "Hideyoshi does not strike me as a master strategist, but remember our reports about his junior warlords, Kanbei and Hanbei. Our spies tell us that one of them is supposed to be here, though they were not able to confirm which of them it is. I've already defeated Kanbei in battle. I am confident that we can do it again. But the other man, Hanbei, is an unknown to me. The only things we've been able to confirm about him is that he is a high-born member of Hideyoshi's inner circle, and many of the kingdom regard him as the smartest warrior Ransai has seen in generations. But his Pokemon partner and personal goals are a complete mystery to even most of the residents of the capital." "We also know that he's quite young," scoffed Yoshitaka. "He may have the confidence and pedigree necessary to back his political plays, but I doubt that he knows much of war. A firm display of strength will see to him begging for mercy by day's end." "If you're going to be using youth as your reason for winning this fight, you're an idiot, Yoshi." Motochika snickered, causing his subordinate to redden with embarrassment. "Don't forget this coalition's supreme commander is younger than anyone else at this table, but his wits and Pokemon will still knock you and yours in the next week." This got the other advisor to subside, albeit begrudgingly, under the amused gaze of his master. "Whatever the case is, neither of those junior warlords are to be underestimated," Keihatsu warned them. He then began to move different marble pieces across the board as he began to give out his orders. "We will be taking a big gamble by changing our pattern of attack, yes, but to continue as we have been makes us predictable, which is very dangerous in war. We will proceed to attack Entei City with the Sharpedo maneuver drafted by Lady Go. Lord Motochika will spearhead the assault with Sirs Takanobu and Odakusai. Sir Ujisato will stand by with the Verizian Company in case of a forced retreat, and the rest of you, minus Lord Motonari, will coordinate your divisions according to their placements on this map. Make sure that our warriors are made well aware of our formation changes before noon, as we have no need for confusion among our number on the battlefield. Are there any questions?" There was a brief moment, and then Go spoke up to inquire, "If I may, Lord Keihatsu, what makes you so sure these are the right risks to take?" "All of war is risk," Keihatsu answered with a slightly bleak smile. "You don't know if you've taken the right ones until the battle is lost or won." The War Council quickly dissolved after that, and the members each went about their various tasks that would prepare their armies for the upcoming siege. Oichi followed Keihatsu as he made his way toward the area where he would find the commanding officers of the coalition forces in attendance. There were a few matters that he needed to address with them before they set off into battle, and the sooner they were settled, the better. The young couple soon found themselves standing among 40-odd warriors from Aurora. each one representing the chain of command over the troops and their Pokemon. A handful were commanders, while more of them were captains, each in charge of a company, and answerable to 2 generals, Naoshige and Takanobu, who oversaw their combined forces as a dual set of regiments, both of whom reported directly to Keihatsu and his council. Unfortunately, one of the commanders from the 2nd Regiment had been slain in one of the more recent battles, leaving a temporary power vacuum that Keihatsu knew needed to be filled before any further trouble was stirred up. There were also 8 ranking officers from Fontaine as well as 5 from Greenleaf, all answerable to their own warlords, who had given Keihatsu free reign of command over them for the duration of the combined campaign. The area itself was a small plot of flat land cordoned off by thin, paneled walls that had been erected shortly after the coalition began to set up camp. As there had been some dissent over who would take over certain command posts among the Auroran forces, Keihatsu knew that it would be best if he dealt with the issues personally as the battlemaster of the coalition before there was any real infighting. He asked Oichi to find a certain officer while he debriefed their allies, so she immediately rushed off to do so, Jigglypuff in her arms. Eevee and Vaporeon called to farewell before following their master to the gathering of commanding officers, where he stopped in front of a large map that depicted a bird's-eye view of Entei City. They waited patiently while he outlined their plan of attack, answering questions posed to him by anyone that had one, and eventually drawing the meeting to a close. If you're familiar with this part and this, spread the word among your troops, Keihatsu concluded. We march when the North Star appears in the sky, so have those not on sentry duty rest while they can. Sir, yes, sir! The officers answered readily. All of you are dismissed except for Captain Kurogiri and Commander Shimura, the young warlord said, startling the 2 men that he had called upon. You 2 I have business with. The other commanding officers all filed out of the meeting area without complaint, though there was more than one curious look being tossed over their shoulders. Keihatsu waited until the other men and women had departed before telling his warriors, "At ease, gentlemen." The 2 of them immediately relaxed their shoulders and allowed their hands to rest at their sides, though they remained quiet as Keihatsu glanced to the entrance to the meeting area to see if Oichi had returned yet, which she had not. He fixed the both of them with a stern look before he said, I have several reports about the both of you from not only your own troops, but the other division leaders, and I believe they require my direct attention. Commander Shimura, I have several dozen complaints stating that you have been trading some of your men's food rations to some of the people in Greenleafs for extra layers to add to your tent during the evenings. Lord Motonari is currently uncovering the truth behind the matters among his forces, but I thought I might give you a chance to explain yourself before I decide if these complaints are worth any credence. Commander Shimura was a middle-aged man, with streaks of silver in his hair and beard. He wore an eye patch to cover a wound that his Porygon Z had sustained many years ago, resulting in the loss of both of their left eyes. He was also Takanobu's uncle, an old friend of Tsunehisa, and an elder brother of the previous queen, so Keihatsu knew the man more than likely despised him, no matter how well he obeyed orders or kept up civil appearances in public. In fact, he maintained his civility as he said, "The men are unused to the rigors of war, which includes punishment for insubordination." Insubordination, Keihatsu repeated with a questioning inflection. Yes, sir, the older man nodded. The men in question broke formation during the last battle, and as a result, our ranks were shattered, leading to the deaths of several of our comrades in Company 7 and many injuries besides, yours included, as I understand it. I considered having them whipped for a punishment, but I assumed that you would find such an act distasteful. I decided it would be better to cut their rations in half and reduce their ranks, as well as assigning them the more menial tasks that fall to the juniors in my division, while also providing extra care for those wounded due to their actions. And the extra blankets that go to your tent? Keihatsu prompted, though he was inclined to believe the man. My trading of the rations for those commodities is true, the man admitted. I did not wish for the food to go to waste, so I arranged a trade with one of our allies who had a surplus of such items on hand. If my lord commands it, I will return the extra pieces. Keihatsu kept silent for a few moments while he studied the face of his subordinate, but he found no signs that the man had lied. Eventually, he said, I believe that you have already been afforded every necessary commodity for a man of your station, so I would prefer it if those extra blankets went to our wounded soldiers. And the next time you decide to withhold food as a punishment, send the rations to our medical team and their Pokemon. The gods know they could do with some extra comforts given how hard we've been making them work. The commander looked a little annoyed at that order, but he quickly concealed the expression behind a mask of passivity and bowed his head to his master. As you wish, my lord, he said obediently. Thank you for hearing my side of things. General Takanobu will be speaking to the troops that wrote you up, and he will decide if additional punishments are required, Keihatsu told him. Your cooperation is appreciated, Commander. Of course, my lord. Again, there was that hint of irritation, but no real sign of defiance, so Keihatsu let it go. He couldn't make the man like him, and who was he to tell anybody how to shape their opinions? Being warlord didn't give him the right to tell anyone how to think. You are dismissed, he told the older man, who then bowed and made his exit, leaving Captain Kurogiri standing alone before him. The warrior is not much older than Keihatsu, but he was the son of Sir Kurogiri, a member of one of Aurora's more prominent noble houses. He had been raised like Keihatsu to train both his mind and body for the responsibility of command and battle itself. His father and Keihatsu did not get along well, and the young warlord suspected that the son also thought ill of him, given the report he had read earlier in the day. Shimura's departure was just in time for Oichi to return with another woman at her side, who was already outfitted for battle. Seeing them, Keihatsu beckoned them over, saying, "Captain Chiyo, thank you for responding to my abrupt summons." "It is no trouble, my lord," she said as she bowed deeply to him. As she did, Keihatsu kept an eye on Kurogiri, which allowed him to see the scowl that he had only just managed to hide by the time the woman straightened up. "What may I do for you?" "It has come to my attention that you have somehow found yourself under the command of Captain Kurogiri, despite possessing a rank equal to his station," Keihatsu told her, though he kept eye contact with the high-born nobleman. "How did this come about?" "Commander Ojiro and his Ambipon were killed in the battle against Takoro," Kurogiri answered a little too quickly. "As his right hand, I assumed command of the battalion." "I wasn't asking you, Kurogiri," Keihatsu said, his voice remaining calm by all appearances. Of course, Oichi knew that this was a good sign the storm was likely to break at any further provocations, be they intentional or not. When the other young man opened his mouth to protest, she quickly shook her head in a negative fashion, causing the captain to hesitate as he wondered just what she was trying to accomplish. Keihatsu, unaware of Oichi's actions, shifted his gaze to fall on Chiyo, who had remained passively quiet during the exchange. "You are the captain of the greatest amount of military experience in the Stantler Battalion, Captain. Why have you not submitted the paperwork to request official command of your post?" "I was informed that the high-born nobles of each division would take control in the event of a superior officer's death, regardless of a commoner's ranking," the woman answered when it was clear that Kurogiri would remain silent. "Is that so?" Keihatsu asked as he returned his gaze to Kurogiri, who looked very nervous now. Was there a written letter establishing this chain of command?" "Yes, my lord," Chiyo answered. "I recognized Sir Ojiro's penmanship on the missive." "Did you now?" the warlord asked with a little upward quirk of his lips. "Did the document happen to have my seal on it?" No, it did not," she replied as it finally began to dawn on her that something was amiss. "Should it have?" "No, because I would never have signed off on something so stupid." Keihatsu deadpanned, causing Kurogiri to flinch. "I don't imagine that it would be difficult for someone who worked closely with Sir Ojiro to forge his penmanship in order to create a set of circumstances more favorable to himself. The fact remains that in my army, the chain of command is based on merit, not birthright, something that Captain Kurogiri seems to have forgotten." Evie's hackles went up as he growled at the young officer, while Vaporeon was eyeing him with a coldly threatening aura that one could expect from a Glaceon. Kurogiri reddened and began to protest. "My lord, surely you don't expect me to take orders from a lowborn with no proper education in the art of war. Surely she is not more fit to command than men like you and I. Her education, if we are to call it that, has been to defend the borders of this kingdom since a time when you and I were in swaddling clothes." Keihatsu snapped, his voice cracking like an angry whip. "You risked the destruction of the chain of command by seeking to prove yourself ready for a title that you have yet to earn, Captain. I have personally defended my throne from both foreign and domestic threats many times over, so no, you and I are not alike when it comes to matters of the battlefield." "But Captain Kurogiri, you are hereby relieved of your post in the coalition forces," Keihatsu announced, cutting the sputtering nobleman off. "You are stripped of your rank in the Auroran army. You will serve the remainder of your time in this campaign as an aide to the medical orderlies. Other than the freedoms granted to you by your duties, you may consider yourself a prisoner, and you shall be tried for your war crimes of insubordination and mutiny upon our return to the capital." He then called for the guards that were posted at the entrance to the briefing area and ordered them to bind Kurogiri in iron shackles. "Lady Oichi will tell you where to take him," he informed the two warriors, while the now disgraced nobleman ineffectually protested his innocence. "Pay his orders no mind, men. Treat him with the courtesies that we offer to our war prisoners, no more and no less." "Yes, Lord Keihatsu," the two men replied dutifully as they began to practically drag the angry young man away. "You seek to undo your father's entire legacy!" Kurogiri shouted as he struggled in vain against his bonds and his guards. "You shame the balance that he created by lifting up lowborn commoners like her, and street rats like that one!" He spat in Oichi's direction at the last part, and something inside of Keihatsu snapped. "Guards!" he shouted, surprising everyone with the force in his voice. When they had paused, he strode forward while saying, "Have him face me." The two men obeyed, which left Keihatsu face to face with the disgraced officer, his face set like flint. "Apologize to Lady Oichi," he said, his voice back to normal. "You have 5 seconds." He made a subtle motion with his hand to wave his betrothed back before she could interfere with the matter. "Or else what?" Kurogiri sneered. "I know you won't kill me, and after the punishment you have inflicted, I don't see how it could get any worse." Keihatsu blinked once before he took a half step forward and stomped his boot into Kurogiri's ankle, producing a loud crunch that announced several broken bones and the likelihood of damaged tendons. He then jerked his knee up to collide with the other man's groin, causing him to double over on reflex before he stepped back and used the other foot to kick the insolent man in the nose, breaking the cartilage and instantly knocking him unconscious. "It can always get worse," he huffed, feeling slightly out of breath as he felt the adrenaline rush begin to fade away now that he had vented his anger. Looking up from the bloodied mess of the now disgraced nobleman's face, he saw the looks of shock on his guards and the women's faces. Drawing himself up, he then said, "My apologies, everyone. I seem to have lost my temperament for a moment." "Should we take him to the healer's ward, then?" asked one of the guards, hesitation in his bearing. "Yes," Keihatsu said tiredly. "Yes, away with him. Heal his nose and foot, but leave him be in the more private areas." "We may not be able to heal his ankle completely," Oichi said, looking a little shaky. "I think there may be some permanent damage to the tendons that could leave him with a limp for the rest of his life." Her wariness honestly hurt Keihatsu more than anything else could at that moment. Even if it had been anger driving him, he had acted with a thought to defend her from undeserved slander. If he cannot walk without a limp, so be it. Keihatsu sighed, just wanting the man to be gone now. Aurora's laws have justified various bodily mutilations in the past in response to treason. "Very well." The girl nodded slowly as the guards began to drag the unconscious young man away. She did step a little closer to Keihatsu as she lowered her tone and said, "May we speak about this in private when events permit?" "Of course," he said with a breath of relief as he saw a possible chance to try and explain his actions. "Before you depart, do let me say that I am sorry. I wasn't thinking clearly, and it's all right," she said with a shaky smile. "We will inform anyone who asks about his injured state of his guilt and then assure them that he is being punished accordingly. I won't hold this against you nor will anyone else here, I think. I do still wish to address it later, though." "As you wish," he promised. "Thank you." With that, Oichi and the guards made their exit, which left Keihatsu alone with Chiyo, who was looking decidedly nervous. "Permission to speak freely, my lord." "Granted." "Am I to be punished because I failed to understand that Sir Kurogiri was attempting to seize power for himself?" Keihatsu remembered that she seemed to have borderline paranoia regarding punishment from the higher-ups. Likely the reason why she never questioned his sudden promotion too much, he thought rightly. Out loud he said, "No, Commander Chiyo, you are not in trouble." "Command?" The woman paused almost as if she were choking on the words she was trying to convey. "My lord?" "Your actions at the border and on the battlefields of Ignis say that you have more than earned this position," Keihatsu told her. "Besides which, I've been short a commander on the War Council since the Battle of Takoro, and it is high time that I have the position filled. You are the person in the Stantler Battalion whom I trust most to wield such authority." He held out a hand for her to shake, which she did with a starstruck look in her eyes. "Congratulations, warrior." "My lord." Chiyo still seemed to be reeling from the sudden promotion. "I thought that only nobles could become higher than captain." "In my kingdom, merit is the basis for advancement, not bloodlines," Keihatsu told her, "and you have certainly shown yours. Now go, and bring honor to your people, Commander." "Yes, my lord." "Deo ecclesiae patre." "Are the preparations completed?" "Yes." "Is everyone in position?" "Yep." "Have our scouts reported any unusual activity in the last hour?" Keihatsu turned toward Takanobu, who immediately shook his head in the negative. "Entei City shored up its defenses during the late morning, as you predicted," he told his master. "Since then, there has been a regular changing of the guard, but the city remains on high alert. They have not, however, prepared any forces to counter us outside the walls." "Perhaps none that we can see," Motonari mused as he gazed at the enemy city from the top of the knoll that he and the others were using as a vantage point. "We are drawing close to the volcanic regions. It's entirely possible that there are dormant underground lava channels that they could use to get about undetected." Nothing like that came up in the... Chica grumbled, clearly itching for his samurai to get some action against the Ignatian forces. What are we waiting for? Let's put some holes in these walls and take Entei City by storm. That seems an excellent way to get killed by me, Keihatsu said as he handed Motonari his looking glass. If you are volunteering for a suicide run, by all means, do so. Just let us tell our men so they can enjoy dinner and a show. You're mocking me. Now, why would I do that? Gentlemen, Motonari said as he lowered the magnifying tube. I can now confirm there has been unusual activity on the border of the city. What kind of unusual? Motochika asked excitedly, his irritation with Keihatsu temporarily forgotten. A ranking officer is waving a white flag atop the city gates. A white flag? Motochika repeated with outrage. What's the big idea? Maybe they intend to surrender, Keihatsu mused while his ally fumed. No! The water-type leader all but pouted. I came here for a brawl, and before the day's out, somebody's head is going to roll. Keihatsu looked askance at him before asking his other comrade, is he doing all right? He lost a bet to me at the first border skirmish. Motonari chuckled quietly. My superior in Grovile accounted for more defeated Pokémon than his Samurott, so he turned over his pipe and smoking materials to me, and he hasn't had a puff since. I believe he is suffering from withdrawals due to his problem of over-relying on his smoking habit to calm himself. It's only a problem when I run out. Clearly. Keihatsu chuckled with Motonari, doing his absolute best not to think about just how deadly his friend's Pokemon had to be in order to outdo the efforts of Motochika's Samurott of all Pokemon. In any case, prepare a white flag of our own and send the signal that there will be 3 of us standing it to attend the meeting in the No Man's Land. By 3 of us, I assume that you mean for us warlords to go and greet whoever is the ranking officer in person? Motonari questioned. I do. If I go, I make no guarantees that the twerp or his retinue get to walk out alive, Motochika grumbled. If no one dies at this truce meeting, I will let you have your pipe back, Motonari offered, to which Motochika quickly brightened up. Sold, he said cheerily as he turned around and started walking briskly down the knoll toward their forces. Let's get this over with, shall we? Once he was out of earshot, Motonari said in an aside, I promised him the pipe, but I said nothing about the special Chrysalia tobacco blend that he has with it. Won't he just find some more or smoke something else? Keihatsu asked as they began to follow their friend. He's gotten rather spoiled in that he only smokes this particular variety, which he will not find anywhere else on the Coalition other than the vault in my airship. Motonari replied with a knowing smile, causing Keihatsu to laugh. If I wasn't certain before, I am now positive that this is going to be an interesting meeting, the younger warlord chortled. They've agreed to a temporary truce, Yoke said with a grin as she plopped down on a seat next to Hanbei, who was reclining on a couch with his eyes closed. Huh? He mumbled sleepily. Go have fun, then. It doesn't work like that, the girl told him as her smile widened. They're sending out 3 people, which means that it'll probably be the warlords themselves who come to the meeting. They won't deal with anyone less than whoever's in charge in that case. That would be you, okay? Perhaps in terms of practicality, she admitted. But on paper, you're the boss. Besides which, you're insane if you think that I'm going to stare down 3 warlords on my own. I thought that I was just in charge of looking like I'm doing something, Hanbei yawned. This sounds like it will require actual effort. Relax. I can do all the talking, Yoke snorted as she got off the chair. Just get in the saddle and look pretty. Fine, Hanbei mumbled as he staggered to his feet. I have to admit that I am curious about what kind of warlords would be stupid enough to attend a truce meeting in a hostile territory themselves. Not as stupid as you think, Yoke told him. They marked the meeting spot just outside the range of our city's defensive range of fire. It's still more than halfway across for them, so while they maintain the appearances of a small concession, they would still only be in immediate danger from us. Guess that kid might be as good as Kanbei was complaining he is, Hanbei mused. You're only 2 years older than him. Why are you acting as though he were a child? Yoke snorted. I stand by what I said. I know, but that's supposed to be my job. Keihatsu, Motochika, and Motonari came to stand on a spot about 2/3 of the way to the city, just in time for the residents of Ignis to make their own approach. Both parties stood at about a stone's toss away from each other, close enough to easily be heard, but not close enough to allow for any physical violence. Per the rules of engagement under a white flag, both sides had left behind their partner Pokemon in their camps, rode in on carrier Pokemon so they were each more than 100 yards away from, having picketed the animals so that they would not wander. The warlord of Greenleaf had a sheaf of papers detailing the conditions of surrender of the Ignatian forces, should their leaders concede before any real fighting could break out. Motochika was looking pensive with crossed arms and an irritated scowl on his face, while Keihatsu was the epitome of calm on the outside, even though he could feel a tight coil of tension growing in his stomach. The warlord of Aurora made a quick study of the people that he would likely be fighting in the next few hours. He didn't trust for a second that the enemy was about to surrender, given that they were supposed to be going up against Townbei, a man whose intellect was supposedly the greatest in southern Ransai, maybe even the entire continent. Still, it was hard to believe that the sleepy-looking young man who couldn't be more than 3 years his senior was truly the man they were meant to bring down. Then again, people have underestimated me for much the same reason. It's never gone well for them, Keihatsu admitted as he shifted his gaze toward the person on Hanbei's right. She wore no armor, nor did she possess any items on her person that could be called remotely extravagant, like one would expect from a person chosen to accompany a junior warlord onto the field of battle. Yet she exuded an air of self-confidence that seemed completely at odds with a commoner on the battlefield, and that made Keihatsu nervous, maybe even more than Hanbei's oddly given disposition. Taking 2 steps forward, Keihatsu made sure to keep his expression neutral as he asked, "You're Lord Hanbei of Ignis, correct?" "That's right," the other young man yawned. "You're the leaders of this trifecta alliance, so welcome to Ignis and all that. What do you want with an army on our front door?" "I think you know the answer to that," Motochika grumbled. "You here to surrender or not? Please say no." Moltenari swatted him on the head with a fan he was carrying, prompted an irritated grumbling from the other warlord. "Well, if I'm being honest, that sounds like a really tempting offer," Hanbei admitted, confusing his opponents just a little bit. "But, I also really like being alive, and Hideyoshi is basically going to feed me to some kind of giant monster if I lose to you guys. So, if you could just go back to your countries now, I'll see to it that Ignis makes no more aggressive moves onto your turf. You've damaged our military enough that we wouldn't be able to pull any funny business for quite some time anyway. What do you say?" Keihatsu hesitated just for a moment. It was a tempting offer, but he knew the answer as well as the next warrior from his homeland. "I'll remember the olive branch you extended today," he answered, "but unfortunately, no, we cannot turn back. Your master has visited too much suffering on our people for us to simply turn the other cheek. He will answer for war crimes committed against the nations of Aurora and Greenleaf, and for that, we cannot stop our advance. If you and your forces wish to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, we will accept your total surrender, upon which you will receive fair treatment by any standards." Hanbei sighed heavily in response. "I wish you guys wouldn't have done that," he said as he crossed his arms with a disappointed look on his face. "Or rather, you'll be wishing that you had gone home when you had the chance." The 3 warlords tensed up, senses on alert for any treacherous measures about to be taken by the Ignatians. Seeing this, the girl on his right giggled before saying, "Relax, geniuses. We're not the types to break a white flag truce, especially when we have all the advantages on our side." "You're outnumbered," Motochika countered. "We have giant walls and lots of weapons on said walls. We have water types. You also have grass types." "I'm sorry, who are you?" Keihatsu said to interrupt the banter between his ally and the Ignatian girl. "Oh, my apologies," she replied with a mocking bow. "Forgive me for not revealing my identity to such illustrious warriors like your noble selves. I am Yoake, a freelancer in the employ of the Ignis' armed forces, until you and yours are either dead or back in your homelands." Something about the way she was talking was familiar to Keihatsu and the other warlords, though they couldn't quite put their fingers on how that could be. "Forgive my inquiry, but have we met before?" Motonari asked with a small frown. "You seem familiar." "Nope," Yoke grinned. "Never met you before in my life. I must just have one of those faces." Hanbei was staying quiet throughout this exchange, Keihatsu noticed, almost like he was waiting for something to happen. If we cannot come to an agreement, then it is to be a battle between us, he announced, once again interrupting the exchange between Yoake and his ally. But you haven't heard my backup offer yet, Hanbei told them. Don't go rushing into battle if you can help it. It's no good for anyone if you don't have contingency schemes for your backup plans. Are we fighting or not? Motochika complained, clearly eager to be done with what he thought was a pointless meeting. Apparently, seeing as you people can't leave well enough alone, Hanbei shrugged. However, since I don't feel like planning a large-scale conflict, I'll make things simple for all parties involved and have a direct challenge issued to the throne of Aurora. If your coalition loses in a traditional 6-on-6 battle against my warriors, you will cede your territory and its people over to the control of Ignis. You forget your place, Motonari warned the younger man while Motochika set his jaw angrily. Even if the water-type leader didn't have a lot of respect for many of the traditions that had been in place for hundreds of years, he took battling very seriously. You can't issue a challenge like that to Keihatsu unless you've made it to Auroran territory, he reminded the others. Even if you won out here, no one would willingly concede to the conditions of your victory. Not even a warlord of a province can issue a legal challenge like that on his own turf, and you're not a full-fledged leader. Now give me one good reason why I don't rip your head off and feed it to my Samurott. Hanbei looked offended at that, then asked of no one in particular, why do people keep wanting to feed me to their Pokemon? You spend all day lounging around, so you're probably a softer meal than the warriors who actually get up and do things. Yoake smirked. And, by the way, warlords, you're forgetting the exception of that rule about making challenges in other people's territories. What exception? Keihatsu asked with a frown. If a blood relative of the current ruler makes the challenge, the territory where the battle is fought becomes irrelevant, Motonari recited. Traditionally, one should get permission from the ruler of the country where the battle is to be fought, but it's not entirely necessary. What is necessary, and what happens to be missing, is a blood relative to Keihatsu, Motochika growled. He's an only child. He has no extended family to speak of. He paused, then turned to look at his ally before asking, I do have that right, yeah? Yes, Keihatsu growled, not bothering to hide his irritation. I'm the bastard child of two people who had no siblings, and my grandparents have long since died. My mother is the only person related to me who might still be alive, and I know that she is not among you. Given the promiscuity of your father, don't you think it's rather bold of you to assume that you are the only bastard child of his in this world? Hanbei asked lazily. This checked the warlords for a second, though Keihatsu was quick to recover. Good try, but we know that you were born to Ignatian parents on both sides, he said confidently. Now, if you're done wasting our time, we have a battle to prepare for. I didn't say that I was the son of Avoki, Hanbei said before they could leave. Truth is, there's only one son of Aurora's last warlord. That still leaves room for a sister. His eyes flicked over to his right for the briefest moment, and the warlords of Southwest Ransai all had a sinking feeling in their guts as it dawned on them why Yoake might seem familiar to them, even if they had never met before. In this case, it leaves room for a half-sister, but I think that makes me good enough to legally issue the challenge, the girl said with a smug expression that she leveled at Keihatsu, who was looking like he had seen a ghost. Good to meet you, brother. I'll be taking your throne from you. After a moment of absolute silence, Motochika snatched the papers that Motonari had been carrying, tossed them in the air, and then slashed them 3 times with his sword before they hit the ground in little pieces, leaving Motonari with a slack jaw as he stomped off toward the waiting Stoutland steeds. Why did you... The grass-type warlord started to ask, only to be interrupted by an angry Motochika shouting over his shoulder. Go and I spent all day yesterday figuring out logistics for assaulting a city full of angry fire spitters, and now I come to fight that we don't even need them in the first place! He raged. If I don't get to use my hard work, you don't get to have your stupid surrender papers! Funny. Yoake giggled while Keihatsu remained silent. You would think that he was the one who just found out an estranged sibling wanted to take his kingdom.
These last couple of months have been so good for me in terms of cliffhanger releases.
And not even intentionally,
far
as...
I didn't line them up like that. That's just what happened.
And then we left everybody with an extra long break after that because life's been insane. So glad we're back.
So hopefully I can clear up this cliffhanger a little bit sooner than the last one. But
What were your, like, how'd you feel about this chapter?
The end definitely caught me by surprise.
Yeah.
And stressed me out. Hella stressed me out, right?
Oh, did I not tell you about this twist either? In advance.
I feel
I
like
thought I
you
had
may
told
have
you about
mentioned
that.
it, but it still hit me.
Okay. Like, you knew that it was supposed to be a thing, but you didn't click that it was her until... Okay. All right.
And then, but that being said, like, kind of going back to the beginning, where do we open?
We open with Keihatsu and Oichi just kind of getting some time to,
That's
like,
what I
just
thought.
enjoy being around each other, which we haven't really seen too much, because, like, there's always something going on in the background for them, and even now that's kind of true, but, like, I wanted to do the visual representation of, like, yes, the army's marching beneath them, but they're, like, up in the sky, and it's just the two of them, so they're a little bit removed from that.
Yeah. Well, for me, I really liked that part because it really reminded me of us early in our relationship.
Yeah.
Where we would call on the phone and we'd just start talking.
Yep.
And before we knew it, the sun was coming up and we completely lost track of time.
And then I slept through so many classes.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like this being young and in love and really just, it's almost a form of escape, but you know, when you're spending time with that person, time goes by so quickly. You don't even realize.
I love that bit where he's just like, oh my god, it's been 10 hours. We didn't even have lunch. What just happened?
And so yeah, and that just, I don't know if that's a common thing, but that really reminded me of our relationship.
I mean,
and so I liked
feel like
it. It made me
I
happy.
feel like that's a thing when, not to sound too cliche, but like when you've got the right person.
Well, I think it's
like,
when you have a good match intellectually.
Yeah.
Because there's the couples who are just like face smashing and just obsessed with each other on a physical level.
Yeah.
And I think for us, 9 times out of 10, people would assume a lot of things because we would spend so much time together where we just genuinely loved talking to each other.
Yep. I mean, I remember my mom telling me about she did that with my dad at one point, like on one of their earlier dates. Like they were just hanging out, and before she knew it, it was 5 a.m, and she hadn't gone home. She was like, "When did that happen?"
Yeah.
So like the first time you and I did that, I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool.
Like, yeah.
That's kind of cool."
Like, you know, but so that was fun, and just the embarrassment and awkwardness.
I loved Naoshige just low-key running interference for them the entire time. Like Takanobu's about to complain, he's just dragging him away by the collar.
So
he's
precious.
keeping their Pokemon entertained, so like even their Pokemon aren't bothering them.
So precious.
And then later on, Kaz like, I think I want to do this, and Naoshige's like, nope. And he knows that he has this dynamic of, I just did you so many favors, you cannot say no to me right now.
Yeah, I love it.
I think my favorite bit of the chapter, or of that part of the chapter, was when Naoshige's like, would you like me to would you like me to bring in the other warlords? And Keihatsu's just like, they're right outside the door, aren't they? And Motochiga's just like, no, there's nobody out here. You guys keep doing what you were doing.
Love it.
That was really fun. And then we have a little bit of a serious moment toward the end of that there, where we've got Takanobu and Naoshige, they're giving Oichi their approval, more or less.
Which is so cool.
Yeah. Because it's like, they definitely, like, at least for Naoshige, there are definitely some questions that he wants answered, but based on what he's seen, his intuition tells him that she's going to do more. She's going to do more good for him than any potential harm. Let's see. We had a little bit. We get to see a little bit more about like why Keihatsu and Aurora at large respected his father so much. Like I felt like it was a good time to do that, and like I wanted to like kind of showcase like how much of a legend he would have been in his prime, because like it's already like we've got Motochika and we got Motonari, 2 of the most powerful warriors around, but they each have 1 and 2 Pokemon, and then we've got a couple people where it's like they're handling 3 maybe, and like, so just the physicality of this guy's presence would have been, it's like he had 3 Pokemon by the time he came on the scene as Warlord. By the end of it, he had 5, which is a massive risk, because if you send 5 of these guys out into battle, they better be some tough bastards, because
because if you compile enough even enough light wounds across the 5 of them, that could kill you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I liked the complexity of the relationship because that's how real life is.
Yeah.
Because so many times in storytelling, there's a character who's got daddy issues because...
And that just makes the dad a bad person all around.
Because dad did X, Y, or Z, which made me not like my dad. And in reality, it's way more complicated than that.
I feel like a good example of that in the modern day is Endeavor with Shoto.
I was about to say that, and I think it's
Endeavor's
done.
a scumbag. Like, and he even says as much himself in the show. He's like, I am never going to be able to pat myself on the back and say that I did my best. And he, like, part of his journey is that he has to accept that his kids will never love him. Essentially, Shoto respects. Shoto literally says at one point, he's like, I can respect the hero Endeavor, but I still can't. He's like, I can't get over what you did to us.
Yeah, and so I mean it shows a little bit of the complexity, but it's more than that because for those of us who've experienced trauma via a parent, there is still a part of you that will always love and long for that parent, whether it's who they were or the idea of who they were, and because as a child, you know your parent almost better than anybody else because you're with them through everything your entire life. That's the person or the people that you're with. And you get to see the very best of them and the very worst of them. You get to see how people misunderstand them or the misconceptions that people have for them, both good or evil. And so you get to really know their heart as a person. And even though he wasn't necessarily super close to his dad, he lived in the castle. He knew what was going on for the most part, as much as the child could. And he would have been, and he would have been, removed from a lot of the situations.
It's pretty much stated that he was raised by his tutors.
Yeah.
But his mother was in charge of him up until she had to leave, and then it was his tutors. Nashige was among one of the more prominent ones, but he and his dad didn't interact all that much.
That being said, though, I mean...
Like, he was around, but he wasn't around.
Yeah, but this is a very accomplished individual.
Yeah.
And as not only his child, but a citizen,
yeah.
He's aware of everything that this individual has accomplished, And, you're going to have mixed emotions about... a dismissive or an absent father anyway. But being able to experience all of his triumphs and tragedies in this whole situation is, that gives him that complex relationship and with his father and with the king, because I feel like he almost has this separate way where he views his father and where he views him as the king.
Yeah.
And... there's this weird dichotomy of the respect he has for him as a leader and the disgust he has with him as a person.
So, I decided to base their relationship loosely, mind you, on that of John Adams and John Quincy Adams. Because John Adams was a great political figure. He ended up being one of the founding fathers. He ended up being one of the people that America needed in order to become founded in the first place. But his home life wasn't the best. It wasn't John Quincy Adams, but one of his sons went off the deep end, turned to alcoholism. He died fairly early on. As far as I understand, he had a pretty good relationship with his wife. So, like I said, it's very loosely based on this, in that John Quincy Adams, his dad wasn't around as much as he would have liked him to be, but he ended up following in his father's footsteps. Became, I believe, the 5th president of the United States. So when basing Keihatsu and Avoki's relationship and method of succession, I decided to kind of follow that model a little bit, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
And then I took some creative liberties and drove certain things to extremes.
Yeah, of course.
But that's kind of where, when I was considering, I'm like, okay, I wanted it to be so that the king had died recently. But how do I want his absence, his loss, to affect his son? And I kind of went off from there.
Okay.
Like, John Quincy Adams respected his father as a patriot and as a leader, and he certainly respected him as a father figure. But from my understanding, there was some wishing that he would have been around more often, because there was
there were other things that happened with their family life that didn't even involve John Quincy Adams, that were just John Adams couldn't be there because his duties mandated that he be elsewhere.
Yeah. That whole theme of the father doing his duty, but then letting his family down.
Yeah. I wanted to make Avoki like a patriot among patriots, like as a leader of a country, and as a leader and someone who loves his country. This guy could do no wrong. Like that's the idea for his persona concerning his duties as a warlord. His personal life, he's just the worst.
Yeah.
But we get to see a little bit of that dichotomy. And I like having Oichi here in this, that she kind of gets to be the audience. Like, she's trying to understand. She's like, you say these things about him, but the results say this.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you reconcile that? So we finally get a little bit more of an in-depth explanation from Keihatsu concerning all that.
So no, that whole scene was, I appreciated it on a few different levels.
What did you think of Takanobu being Keihatsu's technical cousin? Because he's related to the late queen, who was Keihatsu's stepmother.
Yeah.
But like there's no blood relation, but like on paper they could be considered cousins.
That was surprising. I don't know. And initially I was surprised, but at the same time it made sense, because I mean, a lot of times,
throughout history, these kinds of things
there's
happen.
advisors who are close family members because they're the royals, and they're considered royalty, and they have a good education, and they're all of that. But it's interesting because it could be considered nepotism, but at the same time, we have a scene later on that totally breaks that down.
Yeah, we'll get to that eventually. But yeah, I just how do I put this? Like, I liked getting the opportunity to throw in some of the political stuff that had affected them without it being presented in conflict. Because like a lot of the political dichotomies and power plays have been borderline, if not outright violent, up to now. And this was kind of a chance for them to just kind of talk about it. And it's like, okay, so this is why this sphere of influence moves here. This is why these people respond this way. This is why this person dislikes him, so on and so forth. Let's see. Okay, so if we're moving on from the engagement announcement to the other warlords, let's see. We have them setting up camp outside of Entei City, and they're kind of figuring out plans of attack. Keihatsu's like, all right, it's time that we switch stuff up, and some of them are kind of going like, why? This has been working so well for us. And we kind of get to see how Keihatsu's already thinking a few steps ahead of everybody else who's in there. Then we kind of get to see a little bit of like the infighting that happens between some of the members of the ranking members of the army. What was your what did you think? Like, do you think that was just kind of superfluous? Like, this didn't need to happen? Or
no, because we are getting to know this character in both his personality and his leadership style, and so you have this continued theme of the leader versus the person, and so you get to see his personal, more, I guess I want to say, moral compass really coming through in his leadership here, and some of it's the logical versus the emotional reactions to different situations, and
which he displays both in this chapter.
Oh no, absolutely, because he just came out of his strategy meeting, and now he's here having to deal with some situations that have to be addressed.
Yeah, like I wanted there to be almost a conflict in the way that he handled the two different ranking officers, because the first one, it's like, this guy has a lot of reasons to hate him, because again, he's like the brother of the late queen, right? He's the brother of the nephew. Let's see, he was, so he's the elder brother of the previous queen. And so she didn't like Keihatsu, so what reason does he have to either? Because clearly to these guys, bloodline is incredibly important to them.
And he's just,
and now he's taking orders from his eyes, this bastard whelp.
Yeah, basically, Absolutely.
But like I wanted to kind of again, there's these character dichotomies where he's like he clearly doesn't like this and he's hiding it for the most part pretty well, but at the same time he's being a good soldier. Or at least he appears to be for the time being. Maybe that changes later on, but for now, he's
been reprimanded. He's being rectified.
I was like, did you expect that to become more confrontational given the past interactions that he's had with these kinds of people?
Yeah, I thought he was this guy. I thought the first one was going to be stripped of rank for sure, or like, put on court-martial or something. And so
he didn't technically break any rules, is the thing.
Yeah.
He definitely stepped a little more firmly into the gray area that he should have. And Keihatsu was like, okay, look, if you're gonna be trading stuff, give it to the people that actually need it. And and then this guy's a commander, so he's got quite a few people under his command. He's got that's a little bit under his leadership. He's been at this for a long time. He can't just throw that away.
Yeah,
even
experienced.
It's
leader.
Pretty typical, like even in up to relatively recent history, where even if someone of a very high standing did something, just straight up against the crown, depending on the crime and depending on the length of their service, it could mitigate the punishment, because it's like, okay, you did this thing, but we have to weigh that against the fact that you've been serving this kingdom in this capacity for like 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And so it's like, in light of that, we still have to punish you, but it's not going to be as bad as if a squire did this.
Yeah, he's a valuable asset, and as long as he's not mistreating the soldiers and preventing them from being warm and fed, we need to, try to keep him and just make sure he knows his place.
He even says, he's like, I thought about whipping them, but I thought you would disapprove of that. And he was right. So again, it's interesting because he doesn't like him, but that's not
he's
to the point.
He's still respecting the position.
He's respecting the crown, if nothing else, for the moment, because how do I put it? A lot of times when people dislike someone, they tend to shut out any new information that they can get about them. Clearly, that's not the case here. He has learned about Keihatsu.
He's very well aware of Keihatsu's tendencies.
Yeah. And he's not fighting against them.
No, and I mean, that's the thing. If you are that closely related to the crown and you're going to be very aware of the leadership choices, you will have been trained in leadership, because you never know if you're related to royalty who's going to be needing to take the reins, or at least lend support, right?
Yeah.
And so he's going to be analyzing every you're going to be over-analyzing when you don't like the leader, especially. And so
I feel like there's one of two ways that can. Yeah. I feel like either you shut it out and you just want to have as little to do with it as possible, or you do what you were just saying and you overanalyze it.
Yeah, but I mean, the big movers in the story are actually going to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so you didn't expect him to go off as hard on the second one.
Yeah. Yeah. And because that one, I mean, it's pretentious of him, but it didn't seem as harmful. At the same time, he's making a point. It's like this upstart thinks he's just going to take all the glory when there's this actually experienced veteran who knows what she's doing. And it's like, it's not because she's a woman. It's not because she's poor.
I love that bit.
Looking at her experience.
Yeah, I love that. Not trying to toot my own horn, but I love that bit where the guy's like, we've been educated for this. Like, we were literally born into this. You're going to pass me over for this uneducated person? And he's just like, her education, if you want to call it that, has been defending our kingdom since before you and I can walk.
Keihatsu, he's very good at asserting himself in diplomacy and in having conversations with others who look down on him for his age. But at the same time, I think one of the things that makes him a special character is that he still honors his elders in a certain sense, even though he is the authority in the situation.
Oh yeah, he definitely pushes back when he feels like he's had enough, but it's usually his go-to to be like, okay, at the very least, he's like, okay, these guys have reasons for why they're acting the way that they're acting. Usually in his case, it's like, okay, they're acting like this because they think bloodlines are all that matters. Yeah, I don't care for this. But if there are other factors, like again, with Commander Shimura, he's like, okay, he's been doing this a long time. This isn't his first campaign. He had solid reasons for why he is like, okay, yeah, punishing them, reducing their rank, assigning them the more mundane duties, like those are things that he probably would have done. Mm-hmm. He would have just allocated the resources differently.
But
with this guy, it's kind of implied this is this guy's first campaign, and he thinks that he's about to get up to the commander position. Mm-hmm. Which, let's see, I've got notes on how many troops that is. If you give me just sorry, you got to give me just a second on this because I had to keep some pretty extensive notes on this. So this alliance has, let's see, about 5,300 total warriors in it. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but this is not a continent of millions and millions of people, mm-hmm. right? Every country, it's like either tens of thousands or maybe a couple 100,000. Mm-hmm. Like it's not a big population. And a commander, a commander is set over 312 warriors. So that's about, let's see. So a commander would be in charge of, let's see. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do the math.
I love that you know all of this and you take all of these details into account. That's just incredible to me.
I'm like because I'm trying to keep straight. Like I'm like how much influence is this? So that's like 1/9 of the of the total troops. Like that is a significant amount of people to be in charge of. Mm-hmm. And Keihatsu's just like, you thought, bud. He's like, you thought that I was just gonna pass this over. Mm-hmm. This is 1/9 of the troops that they've got.
Yeah, no, he's
not doing that. And like I wanted there to be that. So he does. So like real quick, I'll cut over to like how he handled Chio. I wanted there to be like at least like in the back of your mind, you're wondering if this might be a little bit of favoritism because these two have fought together. Yeah. It's something to remember. Yeah. Like she was the commanding officer at the border, mm-hmm. and he recruited her. He gave her a new command in the marching army because normally you'd leave someone like that at the border, mm-hmm. at their usual post, in case any enemy soldiers get past. But he recognized her for her ability to hold out against much greater forces with a lot less in hand. So he's like, let's see what you do when you're given more. Mm-hmm. And that's a big reason for why he's giving her the commander position here. And he trusts her. He's like you stood your ground, and she's always been very humble toward mm-hmm. him. Mm-hmm. Like when he first came on the scene, she's never interacted with him before. All she knows is this teenager king is coming to criticize her work, essentially. And the first thing she does is get down on her knees and declare her fealty in preparation for any punishment he might decide to give her. Mm-hmm. And he respects the hell out of that. Mm-hmm. So like between that and this guy who tried to basically sneak the position out from under him, it's kind of an obvious choice. Mm-hmm. I didn't really
Would he have been less harsh if the other guy had been more humble in his response?
Yes. He would have been less harsh.
Okay.
But then the guy made it personal.
Oh yeah, he pushed the wrong button.
He pushed the wrong button. He pushed the wrong mm-hmm. button. Like I love.
And then we suddenly have the teenage boy come out.
I love the power play that I was able to pull off with him. Like not what he did physically. He just tells the guards to stop and hold him where he's at. So that this guy knows that he has to just stand there and basically take what's about to come to him. Mm-hmm. But of course, this guy's too stupid to understand that that's what's about to happen, so he keeps egging him on. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, after writing this, I was like, is this too stupid? I'm like, did I make this guy too stupid to where it's like, this, like, not only is he your sovereign, he is the battle master in charge of an entire 3 nations worth. There is literally no one's authority who supersedes him
at this point in
That's the
time.
thing, though. This guy thinks, oh, he wouldn't. There's no way. This is like, he's pampered.
Yeah.
He's a noble. He's like, why? What could be worse than this?
There's a lot.
You've disrespected me,
like,
and I'm gonna throw a hissy fit.
Yeah, and then daddy's money will get me out of it if worse comes to worse. There's a lot to unpack with how Keihatsu reacts to people here, in terms of physicality too, because there were no like I kind of wanted to make a subtle thing out of it, but there were no hesitations in his movements when he knew exactly what he was doing. Like, those movements were all precise and calculated. Each one informed the next of what was going to happen. Smashed his ankle in to make sure that he couldn't even try to run away. Got him in the groin to make him double over because there's pain happening. And he used that movement to do a knee strike up into his face. So the guy was already doing half the work for him. But none of those movements are wasted. You have to have been trained well to understand not only how does the anatomy work that way, but how does the psychology, like how do psychologically people respond to being injured in these ways? And he played off of every single one perfectly. So it's like, we've seen a lot of him doing combat with Pokemon to Pokemon. This is, although brief, one of the first instances where we've seen him like actually throw hands with somebody. Even if the other guy was bound up, I can guarantee you it would not have made any difference. Like this guy could have been out of chains and the exact same thing would have happened. Sorry if I went on a little.
No, you're
sorry
good.
if I went on about that a little bit. For me, there was just a lot that was going into this chapter. Like, even if not too much happens in the way of action in this chapter, I feel like I left a lot for people to unpack, and I really enjoy getting to do that. Let's see. Then we get to what was you were laughing at the bit where Motochika's kind of being like all grumpy, and Keihatsu's like, what's his problem? I took a smoking pipe.
Yes, I was laughing.
Again, there's one of those little bits where like it should make you stop and be like, hang on, what just happened? Because it's now been confirmed that Motonari, the grass type warlord, took out more soldiers and Pokemon than the water type leader did
in a fire
type nation.
Yeah, that's
like that's kind of one of those things where I wanted people to be like,
how?
What, he did what? Because like, we've seen Motochika fight, we've seen how powerful he is, and he's got the type advantages here. And Motonari apparently smoked him,
which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, so it's like, if you're wondering about the power dynamics here, Motonari could easily end both Keihatsu and Motochika if he so desired. The only reason that Aurora and Fontaine are not under his thumb is because he has no interest in expanding his borders.
Yeah.
Nope. He could wipe those two, and it wouldn't even be close.
Love it.
Yeah. Like I just had fun. Like it's such a small line, but it should be one of those things that makes you full stop and rethink. Wait a minute, how does this dynamic actually work? But yeah, I just thought, I was like, I wanted Motochika to be grumpy in this scene because I was like, there needs to be some comedy here.
Oh yeah.
It's
intense.
It was like I had to break it down a little bit because I'm like, okay, if any of them are going to be grumpy at this point, who's it going to be? I'm like, okay, Motochika seems the most likely. How do I get him there? And I was like, he seems like the type. I'm just like, I was trying to think about vices that any of them might have, and I'm just like, he seems like the type who would smoke. like not all the time, but he would enjoy smoking if he goes a long time without it. He starts getting.
Reminds me of
What's that?
Gimli from Lord of the Rings.
Really? He's an Australian Gimli.
He gives me real Gimli vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still only counts as one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. Motochika is just Australian Gimli. I might have to give him that line at some point. Like one of them knocks down a carrier Pokemon that's carrying like 5 others, and they all just go crashing down on a fence. It's like, that still only counts as one.
Love it.
That's hilarious. I had not thought of that at all. What was I gonna say? I think the part that was funniest to me is where he's like, no, They're not allowed to wave a white flag. I want to fight somebody.
I know. He was so done.
And he's just like, I'll give you your pipe back if we can make it through this this truce meeting without anybody dying. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
His mood immediately shifts, and as he's walking away, the other two are like, I didn't say anything about giving him back the smoking stuff that he uses.
Evil mastermind. But no, moving into that conversation though.
So we have the one between Yoke and Hanbei before they head out to meet, and we get a little bit of a better look into like how does their personal dynamic work, because like we know very little about Yoke at this point. We just know that she, like, for all intents and purposes, last chapter is like, okay, it's this person for hire who's obviously skilled in some way, like. Okay, cool. I guess we'll find out more about her later. Now we're starting to figure out. It's like, okay, she's talking smack without any fear of retribution to a junior warlord, which either speaks to her position of power or her own self-confidence. It's like, but which one is it?
Yep.
So I had fun kind of messing around with that dynamic for a little bit, which now we start to get a little bit of a more clear picture. It's like, oh. She has reasons to be confident. But...
And even though she's an antagonist, part of me is just kind of chuckles a little bit because my own personal experience, I know what it is to be the bastard child of the family player.
Yeah.
Who has to come in and make things awkward. And
that's
when I was
kind of what I based this.
Yeah, well, that's funny. I didn't realize
you didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Oh, that's funny.
And part of me when I was younger was real mousy, and I didn't want to make a splash because it was so humiliating when we had the whole conversation of, oh wait, so and so has a daughter. What? And just the number of times I heard that as a child. And so as I got older, it grated on me. And after a while, I got to a point where I was like, no, you know what? I was totally okay with throwing my dad under the bus and just being that sassy teenager who came in and made people uncomfortable because they'd made me to feel uncomfortable and unwanted for so long. And I think just growing up with that experience, part of me, even though she's kind of an antagonist at this point, is just like, yeah,
relates to
girl,
her.
get it, girl. Come on.
I love playing
throne,
with that
honey.
bit where like all three of the warlords looking at her like, she looks familiar for some reason. Like, we've never met her though. Why does she look so familiar? And I based this off of that time where I saw my brother, where he had dyed his hair dark.
And you didn't know who
like
he was.
I was like, that guy looks so familiar. Like I was like, I couldn't place it for the life of me. It was my youngest brother with his hair dyed dark, and the reason I realized he looked familiar wasn't necessarily because he looked like him, but because he looked like me.
Yes.
And I was like, why does it feel like I'm looking in the mirror? Oh my goodness!
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did the same thing. I had to do a double take when that happened. But no, that...
She's just messing with them. She's just like, it's like, have we met before? No, I just must have one of those faces.
The town we live in, I've experienced this plenty, where it's like you're talking to someone and they seem real familiar, and it turns out they're like your third cousin.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just a very common thing here.
Yeah.
It's an old community.
Well, not if you're me.
Well, yeah. Well, you're from your family.
I'm not from out of town.
You're not, but your
Most
extended family is.
Yeah.
And so, your immediate family is here, but that's it.
Yeah.
But for me, like, at least one side of my family has been here since the area was colonized. And before that, because a lot of us were indigenous too. And so it's just, you throw a stone and you find a name, just like, our catty corner neighbor, turns out she's, her kids are my third cousins. And it's just, it happens a lot. And so, it's just that funny moment of deja vu where you're like, I know this person, but I don't know this person. There's something just about their mannerisms or their facial expressions that is
something
so
standing out.
Close, yeah.
So the one thing that I still kind of question myself on, but I didn't really see where else I could insert it, was the rules concerning like when can a warlord challenge another warlord, or when can a warlord applicant, for lack of a better term.
It made sense to me.
Okay, so like It didn't seem like it was just thrown in here at the last minute just to make things happen, or...
No.
Okay.
No, because, I mean, it makes sense to have that rule, because what if a warlord is on a conquest and making poor choices, then someone else who has a right to the throne could step in and say, let's not do this, because this is a tedious situation.
Yeah.
And we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you have a bad leader who's gone wrong, you want to be able to protect your troops and prioritize the people, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to make sure that if there's someone who rightfully could be the leader and has grounds for wanting to change the direction, that they could have that challenge, you know?
My main concern was like, does it seem like, does the timing seem too convenient for the explanation? No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because why
Like,
else would that
biggest...
even come up?
Okay, fair enough. I was like that was my main concern. I was like, is this like a lore dump that's just conveniently happening, or? But I honestly couldn't think of anywhere else that I was supposed to put it up to this point.
To me.
Okay.
Where else would you have put it? That's what I want to know.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe the readers have a different idea.
I couldn't think of anything. Like that's been my defense to myself, but I wanted to see if someone had a different take on the matter.
I mean, if you really wanted to wedge it in there at some point before this, which I don't think you would, it would almost be too obvious if you wedged it in.
It would be too much of a foreshadow.
Yeah,
like, I thought about throwing it in earlier when talking about the state of affairs, like...
I mean, and even just being concerned about one of these distant relatives who serves in the ranks. What if they committed a mutiny? What would happen then, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, if you're that concerned about it, you wouldn't bring them with you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You're only going to bring the people that you think you can, pretty much trust to do their job.
Or at the very least rely on... Even if you can't trust them as people, you can rely on them to do their jobs.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what's happening with Commander Shimura.
Anyway.
But...
I think that's about it.
That's pretty much it. Like, I just love Motoshika, like, throwing the temper tantrum where he just grabs the peace treaty papers, cuts them all up with a sword, and just walking away.
Hits the ring with an axe, shatters the axe.
Yep.
Has
my
tantrum.
goodness. He's Gimli. He's Australian Gimli.
I'm telling you.
Oh my goodness. I accidentally made an Australian Gimli. This is amazing.
Alrighty.
Well, do you have any closing thoughts on the chapter?
That's about it.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to, people seeing the story as it progresses.
I feel like this has been like one of my favorite chapters in that I feel like I managed to fairly seamlessly layer a lot of stuff. Like, yeah, it's like if you're just reading it for face value, yeah, plenty of stuff happens. But like if you're paying attention, you pick up on a lot more. Yeah. And like it's really hard for me to put not put hidden meanings in things, but like drop in little bits that are it'll like even if it's not important, it lends character contribution without making it like obvious or like pulling away from what's currently happening to point this thing out. So the fact that I was able to get like this many things where it's like, oh, he's actually capable of this, or without actually going out of my way and saying it. It just happens by proxy almost.
No, I think it's pretty successful. Yeah. Well, I'm curious to see what everybody else thinks. So welcoming feedback and looking forward to hearing from you guys.
Yep. Glad to be returning to this story. We'll catch you guys on the next one. I hope you guys have a great couple of weeks.